working here. We're having a little difficulty with the technical stuff, and we'll get it figured out. Those of you that know me from Comtree know that I was one of the founders and was the CEO there for 43 years and retired 2 years ago, which is great. You might wonder, what does that have to do with history? Well, I taught for 7 years at Hillsborough High School, and I taught for 20 years American history, world religions, and some other courses out at Jefferson College, and did my master's thesis in Jefferson County history, the farmers in Jefferson County during World War II. So that was my master's thesis. So I've been very much involved with Jefferson County history for many, many years. And being retired has given me the opportunity to do a lot of research and a lot of writing. So one of the things which we'll be talking about today is Governor Fletcher. And I am having a book which is coming out in September, I think, about Governor Fletcher. So that's going to be kind of nice. And I'm going to just briefly mention him today in regard to that. But we'll start talking about Jefferson County history now. And we're still working on that. We'll introduce to you Dr. Renee Huss, who is my remote advance today. She is, since I left mine at home.
Is her Ph.D. in technology?
Yes, she is. She is my technology here. Hey, we got this thing going through there.
Don't touch anything.
The first thing when we start talking about Jefferson County has to do with looking at the land. You might think, well, we're talking about history, we're talking about people and everything like this, and that's true. But all history begins essentially with the land, with the area that you live in as such. And so we look a little bit at Jefferson County, and you might think about Jefferson County. For example, how many of you know that Jefferson County is hilly? Oh, okay. I guess most people are aware that Jefferson County is hilly. So let's look at the next. All right. This is the characteristics of the land, partially. We'll see some of this, with everything with dolomite and limestone. And essentially, this is the real characteristic of our county. And one of the things you notice, even if you're not driving around through the county, is that it is a very hilly area. In fact, only 16% of Jefferson County has arable land. In other words, flat. That's not very much. You might think that, what in the world do we do here? And everybody wanted to know that too when they moved here. What are the things which make this land important? Besides the fact that it's gorgeous. Renee and I were driving up here today we live out on Highway Z, and coming down through the hillsides. One of the things you notice about Jefferson County is its beauty. And it's always been that way. It's always been a beautiful place as such. But the land itself, since it does not lend itself well to flat land activities, has to be used for other purposes. For example, St. Charles County, we know, has a lot of industry. Jefferson County does not, and largely it's because we have no flatlands. Years ago, there was a debate about whether we should put another airport in Jefferson County, and I was a moderator for a lot of discussions about that. One of the things we found out was there are only 3 places in Jefferson County that you actually put any kind of airport. Now that's kind of an amazing situation. But people would come to Jefferson County. Well, for example, how many of you were born here in Jefferson County? Just a couple of you. How many of you here moved here as adults? Okay. You came to Jefferson County for a particular reason, would be my guess. Either you came with a spouse, or you came looking for a job that was in Jefferson County, or the proximity to St. Louis or St. Louis County was nice. We have lower taxes here, it's prettier than St. Louis County, and there are a lot of advantages to being outside an urban area where you don't have to live within the urban area, and you have still the advantages by only driving 25, 30 minutes away. So there are a lot of reasons why people move to Jefferson County. And the early settlers, the same thing would come about too. People have lived in Jefferson County for almost 12,000 years.
Uh-oh.
This picture shows you.
We went out.
It's not, I don't think it's that. Okay, we're going to keep going. What you see or what you don't see on the screen right here is an absolutely gorgeous picture of people with spears going towards a mastodon. 12,000 years ago. 12,000 years. The fact is that they came to this county for the exact same reasons you all did. They came here because the resources were important. They came here because they wanted to make a better life for their families. They came here because they felt that this was a spiritual and beautiful place to be. They came here for all of these reasons, just like you all did. So they function a little differently. They were there using spears to kill the mastodon, but their purpose essentially was to take care of their families, to have a good life, to have something that was very important. So they were able to do so. How many of you have been to Mastodon State Park? It was just right down the street. It's beautiful, isn't it wonderful? Mastodons were exciting. I mean, when I moved here back in 1967, they were just starting the whole Mastodon project. And I saw my very first full mastodon bones in London, England, at the British Museum. And Renee and I were there with 5 teenagers, if you can believe that. And we were over there, and we were in the British Museum, and I was looking, and I thought, mastodon, that's really neat. I want to go see this mastodon. And so I looked in there, and the little plate said, Mastodon, Kimmswick, Missouri. I had to go 4,000 miles to see a mastodon that they took from about 8 miles from my house, which was just absolutely ridiculous. But we're going to see that Jefferson County has a lot of things which are important and have been important, not just in this state, but also in the nation as we kind of move through the area through here. So, anyway, try one more time. We've got our mastodon. That's all right.
It's like it can't hurt anything.
That's okay. All right. The Native American settlements that came through here originally were small indigenous peoples, maybe a group of 8 or 10 families lived in a small area. In fact, there's a lot of research that's being done now in different places. Some of them were related to Cahokia. The famous Cahokia that had 20,000 people living in it when New York was still not doing very much at all. But this area provided lumber, it provided animals, it provided a place for salt, it provided a place for special activities, religious activities, we think, too, during there. So Jefferson County fed this big, huge conglomerate as one of the areas that was able to help them survive. Well, after the decline of the Cahokian peoples...
It's up.
It's up? Good, okay. After the decline, what we see are other Native Americans come through here, the Delaware, the Missouri, Shawnee, Osage. Next one.
Trying.
Like that, keep going. One more. They left their marks in a lot of different ways, as you can see through here. The Osage Indians were the last ones to be here. By the 1830s, even the Osage were gone. Early Europeans came here, and they came here for a lot of different reasons. Spice, sugar, sassafras, tobacco, things of this nature. They were hoping to be able to provide those areas. Oh! And but they didn't stay. The first earliest settlers, the Frenchmen that came in through here, did not really stay very long. And there were a lot of reasons for that. One of the main reasons, again, there's not much arable land. How much tobacco do you find grown in Jefferson County? How about cotton? Rice? Indigo? The land itself doesn't allow large farming. So as a result of that, we'll see that whatever they were able to use to be able to make money with, they were able to use it in just small amounts. They were a small lead mine. There are lead mines out on Sandy Creek right now, if you're familiar with that area. But the lead mines are very, very small pockets of lead. But they do exist all across from Highway M, basically all the way down to the bottom of Jefferson County. There are numerous places which are through there. The first permanent settlers are primarily, we'll talk one, and that's the Husky farm. If you're familiar with the Husky family or you know the name, it's been there for a long period of time. This is still operating, this farm. It began in 1803. It is one of 3 operating farms that have existed, the earliest farms in all of the area west of the Mississippi River, which is pretty significant. We'll talk about the Husky farm a little later on. And dropping my train of thought here
Okay.
in regard to that.
Herculaneum.
Okay. And the first major operation to be able to settle in the area starts at Herculaneum. Now, you might wonder, why Herculaneum? Herculaneum was kind of the halfway point down the Mississippi River from St. Louis all the way down to the lead mines and to the Ironton area through that. And so while that area itself, the lead mines are there, the iron, that was important to get to St. Louis, and they decided that a good place that you needed to be able to drop lead, to be able to have it form into bullets, those things, Herculaneum was part of what's called the Crystal Escarpment. Now that basically, the Crystal Escarpment is a cliff that's right along the Mississippi River. You essentially follow the Crystal Escarpment as you move south from St. Louis. The Crystal Escarpment is the very first part of the foothills of the Ozarks. So, people don't realize that. Jefferson County is actually the foothills of the Ozarks. So this area that they could drop a lead was a very perfect place to go. And so Herculaneum is created. It was never intended to be the county seat. It wasn't even specifically focused on to be a county as such for a while. It was a stopping off point, the middle point for to be able to do that. Sorry, let's give it a second here.
May I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely.
When you were talking about the Indians, they came in, who do we identify as like the very first?
The very first were actually, they were just Cro-Magnon men and women that came over here down from the Bering Straits. They moved down through here, and we know that they were here 12,000 years ago because we've actually found a Clovis point from the Clovis culture. And that little point, they have one in the Kimmswick Museum. If you haven't been to the Kimmswick Museum, you need to go. It's just an absolutely beautiful place. They put it together very, very well, and they have a real Clovis point. And those are one of the few, I bet there aren't 24 Clovis points in the entire world.
And so they were just a nomadic people?
They were nomadic people that moved down and they came for the exact same reasons. They followed game, and they liked to follow the mastodon because all you had to do was kill one, and you had a lot of material to work with from then on. They could use the mastodon skins for coats, for their tentings. They didn't do tents like you see on the Great Plains. They were rounded areas through like this. They did not have teepees or anything of that nature. Okay.
No,
I'm not gonna-
it's gotta be back there. Give me. Come on over.
We're doing good. There you go. That was a Clovis point. You see there. And you got to watch closely. They
There
follow
you
things
go.
really fast. So there you go, right there. See, he's really moving in over there. That's the Clovis point. Hey, this is going to work out good. We have actual AV activities here. We get motion pictures. That's it. We're having motion pictures now. Literally motion pictures.
And this is the one we will have for eternity.
It took a lot of close points to get that guy down, didn't it?
Yes, you would have done so.
So just like Flint?
What you see here are businessmen going to work at that time period. And what you see is teamwork. Now, those people were most likely related to each other. They were most likely because they very seldom had more than about 8 families that lived in a particular area as such. But they would have 8 families here, then a mile or so away, another 8 families, and those things. And as they developed in it, when Cahokia took them,
Do you want me to dance?
yeah. Keep going. Keep going. This area here, the Cahokia, is of course where they were able to provide materials, but you have 20,000 people here. They can't survive themselves without having outposts. They had to have resources. For example, how much of its own food does St. Louis grow? You know, they don't grow any. They have to have outsourced too. Well, Jefferson County was a part through that. Go ahead. All right, keep going. All right, Louisiana Purchase, 1803, changes everything. And this allowed the land to be dealt with, and across the Mississippi River here, no one knew what was out there except Native Americans that were blocking the way in some ways. Keep going, Herculaneum. All right, we're going to look at this time period that starts afterwards. The most important thing for today, particularly, is the fact that on December the 8th, 1818, Jefferson County was organized as part of the Missouri Territory. Now, what's interesting about this, besides the fact that we started, is the very simple fact that we are a county before Missouri was a state. Yeah, how about that? Isn't that something? I always thought that was pretty cool. But the other thing, which is even more amazing, this is 40 years before the Civil War, 1819. The first act of government, a grand jury resolution, essentially said, we hate slavery. Now, we're in a slave state. In slave areas, you can have that. But the county took a stand in 1819 opposing slavery. They said, we hate it, we think it's ridiculous, it's horrible, we have no idea what to do about it. We have no legal authority to do anything about it. But we took a stand opposing. Now this becomes significant because by the 1860s we'll see Jefferson County is a strong supporter of the Union. Now, the same county government that starts this grand jury resolution now organizes, and what do you think the first thing that they need to do as government? Taxes, right, Renee? You have to have taxes. Now, what we must understand is that they really had to have taxes. They had to be able to provide roads, they had to provide safety, they had to provide eventually education. They had, as long as taxes are dealt with responsibly and transparently, taxes are what makes a county grow. It can stimulate the economy, it can make an organization be greatly helpful. A lot of it we determine about what a county is like by looking at what they tax and what they spend their money on. The first tax in Jefferson County, and each horse, mare, mule, or ass above 3 years, 25 cents. Meat cattle above 3 years old, 6 1/4. For every slave, 50 cents. What's the next one? That is the equivalent of a billiard table of $45,000 today in taxes. That's what this amount is calculated at.
They didn't want any billiard tables.
You don't think they wanted any billiard tables? There's something about billiard tables that people had questions about going on. To be fair, they were usually in taverns. They were having some difficulty here and there and the other. All right. In 1821, Jefferson County, as part of Missouri, becomes a part of the state itself. They decided to move the capital to Hillsborough, and other people become involved with the county at the same time too. We'll see the very first significant person, I think, in Jefferson County is probably Daniel Duncan, called the father of the Missouri public school system. He believed that in order for the people of Jefferson County to really compete in the markets, to be able to do things well and to be good supporters of government, they needed to be educated and needed to be educated well. Benjamin O'Fallon, I put him on primarily because he owned 20,000 acres in Jefferson County that time period. Can you imagine 20,000 acres? Incredible. The United States by 1820 was beginning to change. We were pretty proud of ourselves. We had just fought the War of 1812, which ended in 1815, and we defeated the British Army, and we fought them to a tie, essentially. But it was the same army that Napoleon got defeated by. We were able to stop them from taking over this country and such. So we were pretty proud of ourselves. And we began to look at all the opportunities that we had in this nation. We had all sorts of possibilities now that we had this Louisiana Territory, but we began to also start looking at ourselves. We began to ask questions. What's the role of women in society? How should we treat the mentally ill? What should be done in prisons? What's the best way to assure education for democracy? What are the implications of freedom of religion? We ended up creating, actually in the United States, a religion that didn't exist anywhere else in the world, and that was Mormons, the Mormon groups. Is there a better economic model than capitalism? A lot of people were getting together and having communes at the time. But what should we do about the alcohol problem? Adult males at that time period, in 1820, if you took an average, you took everybody who lived in the United States and all the alcohol that was consumed, you would get 7 gallons a year. Now, a lot of those people you were counting were babies, children, women that weren't drinking, and so on. So somebody was drinking a whole lot of alcohol. And it was becoming a problem, and it was recognized nationally, nationwide as such. By 1860, that had been dropped down to 2 per year, 2 gallons a year, because of the temperance movement. The temperance movement across the United States becomes very important. They try to explain to people that you don't have to stop drinking, but you don't have to drink as much as you've been doing. And the legislature got involved too. In Indiana, in 1824, they passed a restriction on the number of apple trees on a farm. Why would they do that? Applejack, absolutely, Applejack. People were taking their apples and they were converting it into alcohol. Number one, it's easier to transport. And then you sell it across, instead of taking a whole wagon full of apples, you take a few barrels of Applejack, you can sell that, and it doesn't take as much time to get it to the marketplace as such. Well, but the big issue had to do with what do you do about slavery. Slavery becomes the main issue. And it became the main issue especially by a group that we are very indebted to, a group of immigrants known as the Germans. How many of you have German background in your You know, I could guarantee that was the case because I know what Jefferson County population is. And I know where the people came from. In the 1840s, 1848 and 49 in particular, Germany did not exist. There were about, I don't know, 70, 80 city-states, little principalities as such in Germany. And they were always fighting each other. But one of the common threads was the aristocracy was taking advantage of the people. And so there was a big revolt. It started in France, actually, in 1847 and 48, and spread to Germany. And they were trying to promote democracy. They were trying to promote the rights of workers to have a good living. They were wanting participation, and they felt the aristocracy was absolutely trying to keep everybody down, and they lost. The aristocracy had all the money, and they had all the weapons. And so these Germans, so many of them, decided they can't live because they were being treated basically like slaves. Now the Germans that came over to these, you need to understand, these are your ancestors. These people were fighting for freedom, and they were heroes. They came to the United States getting away from this tyranny that was all over Europe to find themselves in a country where they could be free and take care of their families. Can you imagine what it would take for you today to pick up take just what you could get on your back and a few dollars or whatever you could put together and go live on the moon. Now remember, these people didn't speak English. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know what they would find when they got there. And they came anyway, here, looking for something better in life. And they especially loved the St. Louis area and Jefferson County. Jefferson County in many ways looks a lot like Germany. And these people came over, and when they came over here, they found themselves in a slave state. But they also, the ones that lived in this area, found themselves in a county that was opposed to slavery. That was pretty neat. That was pretty neat for them. They wanted to make sure it was still that way. Other people didn't want to make money the old-fashioned way. They wanted to literally make money. Counterfeiting. 1851, one of the largest counterfeiting rings in the United States was in Hillsboro, Missouri.
That's nice to be known.
They were actually,
Never changed?
they found almost $6 million in today's value under an old outhouse right outside of Hillsboro during that time period. Never did find the guy is gone, but they did find the money as such. Well, let's look at Jefferson County in 1860. Jefferson County in 1860, there are only about 7,000 people, 512 slaves, 9 free African Americans, and 6,400 others. Only one place had an acre of more than 1,000 acres. One place had more than 1,000 acres. The issue was slavery still. That was the main issue in Jefferson County and in St. Louis. And the slaves were revolting in many different ways. People have often wondered why the slaves didn't actually just rise up. Well, there were a few places. Most of them fought back by running away. They fought back by having a lot of fires occur. There were a tremendous number of fires on plantations. Just all the time, something was burning, something or another. It was really accident prone, I guess. And there were all sorts of accidents as such going through there. In Jefferson County, while there weren't very many slaves, 5 of them decided to kill a man by the name of Kimmick. They did so, and were caught, and were taken to Hillsboro Courthouse, and they were then tried, convicted, and hanged at the Hillsboro Courthouse. Such. So even though there's we have slavery here, there's still resistance to it. Tremendous pockets of it. St. Louis at the same time is growing and strongly anti-slavery because of the Irish for one thing, and mostly because of the Germans. And here you see where the city of St. Louis was like in 1860, and there's Grand Avenue as such. That was the outskirts of St. Louis City. But if you look at the Mississippi River through here, anytime, day or night, you could see 250 to 300 steamboats, either loading or unloading. I mean, day or night, constantly through there. When we talk about St. Louis as being the gateway to the West, it was really the gateway to the West. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Well, the election of 1860 results essentially into the Civil War. We're not going to go into the Civil War in great detail as such. We'll mention Fletcher, of course, the Fletcher House that's in Hillsboro. We haven't been, how many of you have been to the Fletcher House? Only a few of you. No, those are places that play another place that's going to be really significant at some point too. Well, Fletcher is the hero of the Battle of Pilot Knob. He was a POW. He was very active in all sorts of ways. But the most important thing about Fletcher for our purposes, essentially, was he was the last governor, Reconstruction, last Civil War governor, and the first Reconstruction governor in the state of Missouri. He's also the first native-born governor and the first Republican governor of the state of Missouri. This is what we need to pay a little bit of attention to before we start getting into the real positive stuff about Jefferson County and its growth. After the Civil War, Missouri was a devastated state. You have no idea. We talk about Syria, we talk about Afghanistan. They had nothing on us at the time. Missouri was in far worse condition in many of the southern states as such. The prices had gone astronomically higher, just almost incredibly higher. There were 4 counties right outside of Kansas City that during the war where so much Southern support was envisioned there that the federal government ordered them evacuated. Not just the people who were pro-South, everybody. They relocated over 20,000 people out of those 4 counties as such. And most of them never came back. But we had also lost civilians as soldiers, and as well as soldiers. We had over 23,000 civilians killed during the war by traitors, by terrorists, essentially, who were wearing Confederate uniforms very often and killing people, primarily to get whatever money or whatever else they could get. There were no railroads that ran in the entire state, not a one, when the war was over. Eventually, they get one running from Kansas City to St. Louis irregularly. Severe labor shortage. A third of the population of Missouri was gone somewhere or another, either fighting somewhere or they were moved away to do anything they could to survive. No law outside major cities. Roaming bands of outlaws. The southern part of Jefferson County was a wasteland. You took your life in your hands if you're going to go from DeSoto to even towards Hillsborough, let alone going up to Maxville or something like that. You might get some crops and take them in from say Hillsborough to St. Louis. As soon as you got your money, getting home is the real issue, because outlaws let you take your goods to market, but getting them home is another story. This was constantly the situation. They were having all sorts of vigilance committees all over the state of Missouri going on just to be able to survive. Inadequate military, few militia. The southern banks were absolutely bankrupt. There was no schools outside the major cities. Throughout the entire war, Jefferson County had no educational system. Zero going on through there. And at this time period, if you had someone in your family who died, you had a wake. You had your friends come together. You dressed the body. You got everything ready for the funeral. And you put the person lovingly into the ground on your own farm very often. How many of you have seen private cemeteries all over this county? That's what you did. That was common. The churches were supportive of this. But during the Civil War, your soldier who was your son, who was your father, who was your brother, who was your loved one, could be in some battlefield, and after that, there were no such things as dog tags. And so they buried these people in common pits. So you would never see them again. The psychological stress, now obviously it's something I pay a lot of attention to working at ComTrade all those years, but it was incredible as a result of this war. Racist sentiment continued. Neighbors feared and hated neighbors. This was what Fletcher had to deal with when he became governor. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about that, but let me tell you, when Fletcher left, the population had increased over what it was before the beginning of the Civil War. The crops that were produced were greater than they were before the Civil War. Railroads existed all over the area, and it was a safe and secure state, among a lot of other things too. People have forgotten, literally forgotten about this particular governor, and he was an amazing man. Okay, now we see the growth. Now this is kind of the fun part of the growth of Jefferson County during the time period. During the late 1800s, we really began to grow. All sorts of places. A lot of these things are going to grow. Some of them are going to be fading away, largely dependent upon what the roads are. Which roads go where, that'll determine whether your town exists or not. And towns and hamlets usually involve basically one. Okay.
The X up there on the right.
Yeah, get the X up there.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, try that.
It's not responding. There you go.
Cancel. Try
I
cancel.
tried cancel. None of this is responding.
What if you just click on the main like underneath it, the main screen, sometimes they'll make that go to the background.
Put the word, yes, that low.
No. There, right there.
Press
Click
that.
there.
That's it.
Next one on. Next one on. I want to talk just a little bit about Kimmswick, because Kimmswick is a jewel in this county that people have often forgotten. I think they're getting back to it a little bit now. But Kimmswick actually became a resort town. One of the things we find out about Jefferson County between the 1800s and really even to today is the fact that we are looked at as a place to go to visit. Roads become important. And the Kimmswick area was very accessible from the Iron Mountain Railroad or an excursion steamer as such. Here is the Kimmswick area. This is a postcard from 1928. Come to Kimmswick. You can swim in the Mississippi River here.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. The river had not been dredged at this time period, so it's not the same Mississippi River that it is today. It's definitely different. And here's a beautiful park called Monsanto Park. All sorts of things were going on in Kimmswick, from slum children being brought out for an outing, gun clubs through here, Billikens are there, this National Guard came out to train, and this is the one I like, George Hall. George Hall was a swimmer. Approximately where the arch is today, he got in the water in the Mississippi River and swam to Kimmswick.
Oh.
And back.
Downstream.
Yes, he was trying. That's pretty amazing through there. Okay, other places, we're not going to go into great detail. Maxville, Burnsville, Burnsville areas. Sandy Creek, we're only like only three covered bridges left in the entire state of Missouri. There's four covered bridges left in the state of Missouri. See, I learn everything I go. Windsor Cliffs, House Springs, all these things are developing during that time period. But this one becomes really significant. In 1868, the beginning of what becomes Pittsburgh Plate Glass. Crystal City in 1888 is created. It is a company town. A lot of people are not aware of that. You could not own a house in Crystal City. You could not own a business in Crystal City. And you could not get a drink in Crystal City. So as a result, around Crystal City, people built houses, but they also built bars. There are numerous ones. In fact, they call the area surrounding it Tanglefoot. Tanglefoot, they called it Tanglefoot because when people went to have a beer or something, and on the way back home, they had to walk through the briar patches and got their feet all tangled up and like this. By 1878, they decided that was not an appropriate name for the town. And so they renamed it a couple of things. They tried different names, and finally, in the same year, one of two things happened. If you're from Festus, you've probably already heard the story that one of the prominent women of the town was asked to help develop the name of this new town, and they opened the Bible, and they picked the first proper name, and it was Festus, who was the governor of Judea. Sounds great, doesn't it? Or the man who financed the incorporation of the town, and was also a philanthropist, by the way, was named Festus Wade. Pick whichever one you would like to give.
It was a miracle because it had to have been that they want to name it after him, but she found the verse and it went right to that name.
Yeah, of course it did. Absolutely. Thank you, Mindy. I've always wondered how that came about. Well, anyway, Elizabeth may or may not have done that. Who knows? And here's Festus, and I always show this one. These are just a few pictures of Festus. One of which I always liked because of this building right here. That was Contre's building. Compared to that. Still is in there. And then back here is the first building that Contre ever had, the old meatpacking house back in that area when I first started back in 1973. She carries through there. Everything changes. Particularly of significance, however, is St. Joe Lead in Herculaneum. Herculaneum is a real vital community even today. It does great things there. One of the things that people are not aware of usually, at one point, St. Joe Lead produced 70% of the United States lead. I mean, that is a huge amount coming back through Jefferson County and such. And here are just some pictures of the lead company. This shovel is used all over the world to increase the capability of bringing something out of the ground. And it was designed in Jefferson County. Hillsborough was incorporated in 1873, and it is, remember, it was back in the 1830s, it was the county seat, but it wasn't a city. It's not incorporated as a city until 1873. They have hotels there, jail, county poorhouse, by the 60s even gravel roads as such. Carry away with that. But it's also the farm, the place where the Huskies lived right by as such. And this was an article in the newspaper in 1915 in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, I think. They found that there was a man, one of the Huskies, some of you may know Mike, who's on the Bicentennial, his grandfather is who they're talking about here. The Husky cabin has been moved to the Fletcher house. But at the time, when he died, he used to keep gold coins in a cedar log somewhere, and if we needed money, he would go out and get it. But he'd never let anybody in the family know where the cedar log was or anything like that. So, well, he died. And nobody had any clue. Somehow this got into the St. Louis papers, and they had people coming from all over the place to the farm to see if they could find it. Now, Mike's never been able to find it. So I talked to Mike, I don't know, a couple months ago, and was telling him about all this. He said, yeah, he said, you're not going to tell anybody about that gold on the farm. I said, well, of course not. So I don't want any of you to say anything to anybody about the gold that might be out on his farm. And you can come at the Fletcher site and see if it's been somewhere in the building. Who knows? We also are known for one of the first three, some people say the first, some people say one of the top three, women serial killers in the United States. No interesting things and such. 18 people probably killed, rat poisoning, and medicine limited. You do not want to have afternoon tea with this lady. She is found not guilty and sent to Farmington State Hospital because she was not guilty by the reason of being insane. She was there for a couple of months and cured. Now, I ran Comtree for 43 years. And we never were able to cure anybody in that period of time. So they were a lot better than I was, obviously. DeSoto is also significant. Fletcher actually is one of the co-founders of DeSoto, the city of DeSoto.
Doctor,
What?
did the killings continue after she was released?
No, luckily she died about 2 years later after she was released.
She actually didn't.
No, she didn't.
She actually stayed in the facility until her death, but it was more than 2 years.
Yeah, it was
She
more
did-
than 2 years.
30 years.
Yeah,
Yes.
like
I think
At the
it was
time,
in the
they supposedly
1950s.
let her work in the kitchen.
Yeah, they did. They did. It was her great-granddaughter that did the
Yeah.
program last month,
Yeah,
so.
so there.
You missed that one.
It's kind of an interesting situation. Well, DeSoto becomes important for a lot of things, primarily the railroad, as we all know, but also because of the water. The artesian wells that were there. I made a comment to somebody, there were like 24 artesian wells still in the city of DeSoto. The fact is that according to the people from the Historical Society, there are probably twice that many that are still actually going there. And the water becomes very, very significant. Here's DeSoto in the 1890s. And the Iron Mountain Railroad becomes so important, it's a car works, they're still a major employer in the area. But at the time, in 1882, their monthly payroll was the equivalent of $6 million payroll today. I mean, it was a big deal in the railroad into that area through there. It's also known for one of the fun things. You know, every once in a while you just find really fun things when you're doing some research in history. And I came across this one. I thought this was so great. Now, these are the two bicycles. Now, you've probably seen these two different kinds of bicycles. Famous race in 1887 comes about. between Hal Greenwood and Percy Stone. It's going to be a 90-mile ride from Pine Street in St. Louis to DeSoto and back. And remember, there are no cuts. All the roads are like this.
Yeah.
Coming down on those bicycles.
Yeah.
Down through there. Well, Hal makes it to DeSoto and comes in and says, "Where's my fried chicken and my ice cream?" He was unhappy he didn't have it. DeSoto was known for its ice cream. I don't know why, but it was such. Percy Stone came in, collapsed, and said, "I'm going home by rail." And that's exactly what he did. And so Hal wins as such. In the World's Fair, Fountain City sent bottled water to the fair. They would send a bottle of water, and it would cost you a nickel. You could get a DeSoto bottle of water for a nickel, or you could get a beer and a hot dog for a nickel. That's how important this fountain, this city was at the time. People also came down to visit Jefferson County for the Boneyard from the World's Fair too. We were known for roads, as I said. This was a tour suggestion, and this says how to get there. The midpoint's DeSoto, where it has 5 ice cream shops. Different things that you can go through there. Second thing, you get strawberries, cherries, grapes, things of that nature through there. At the same time period, Jefferson County was going through the same issues that everybody else was, and that there was a real problem with drugs coming about. Laudanum, which is opium, if you were needing something to make you feel better, you could take a 10% solution of opium called laudanum. But if your children were feeling bad, you could only take paregoric, which only had a 4% solution of opium for your children. Or if your kids had toothache problems, you can get cocaine toothache drops. It works. I guarantee you it works. It will numb you something else. Coca-Cola had only had cocaine in it for a period of time. And from Bayer you could get Bayer aspirin, but you could also get Bayer heroin. You can order this from Peruna or Lydia Pinkham. Lydia Pinkham was 70% alcohol. Women used to have Lydia Pinkham parties with their little cucumber sandwiches. And even shortly before Fletcher died, he made an announcement that he was supporting Peruna, which was about 60%, I think, alcohol at the time too, as such. Well, the early 1900s, Jefferson County gets involved primarily in producing what we call truck farming. A lot of goods are taken and sent and sold in St. Louis County and other places. So this was the major productivity that we occurred. The Prohibition Amendment comes about, and all sorts of things begin to change. We have World War I, of course. The farmers in Jefferson County were encouraged to increase their productivity, buy tractors, do all these things. And by 1919, the war is over, and French and Belgium and Germans can produce their own food. And so Jefferson County farmers are stuck with all of this indebtedness. So by 1920, Jefferson County farmers pretty well go into depression. So when 1930s come along, they've been in depression, they know how to work it. So we have the first female elected to county office, a lady by the name of Florence Denning, the recorder of deeds as such. Jefferson County starts getting into some difficulties too, particularly because the proximity to St. Louis, and St. Louis County has good parts and it also has some bad parts. One of the difficulties was that a lot of people could make money by doing gambling. This is the Biltmore Club. Some of you may remember the Biltmore. Yeah. In fact, it was a big gambling area, primarily operated out of the Chicago mob, by the way.
So it's professionally run.
Yes, professionally run as such in there. Okay. Police captain accused of dry law violation. I love the one. Skeleton is found in moonshine vat. I'm thinking this is most likely going to affect their quality. And maybe their sales. I'm not really sure which one's going on for sure through there. Unless the officials of Jefferson County, which virtually adjoin St. Louis on the south, takes immediate and drastic action against the gamblers and moonshiners who are invading the strip beyond the Merrimack, they're likely to find the county overrun with undesirables in a short period of time. This did occur, we'll see, until the early 1960s. Jefferson County had a lot of people who were a little shady when it came to gambling issues and alcohol and other kinds of things of that nature. Poor farm was not doing too well either, and eventually the early 1950s is eliminated. Again, we're still looked at as a place for scenery. 90-mile circuit with good highways. That's not good highways compared to what we have today, by the way. Those are gravel roads, so if you have them there. Pretty scenery, places for making coffee and winter picnic out in the open. This is the best place to go, is Jefferson County. Well, by the time the Depression comes about, Jefferson County is having great difficulties. Even though we're still, we can produce a lot of our own goods, we're still having difficulties like everybody else as such. This is how we primarily produce crops. I bet you some people in this room have seen this go on. They've seen people use those as such. The New Deal comes in, however, and says every American has the right to a job, an adequate wage and decent living, a decent home, medical care, economic protection during sickness, accident, old age, or employment, and a good education. The Works Progress Administration is created during this time, the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, everything, all the different things like this. This becomes important because the federal government said, you don't just give people stuff. If you give people stuff, they don't value it. If you give a person a job, then they have value, they have honor, they feel pride, and they will do everything they can to be as successful as possible. And so creating the infrastructure and improving the infrastructure was what the New Deal was often about, giving people jobs. In WPA projects in Jefferson County, I only found a few. There are not that many that I found, so if people know others, I'd like to know. WPA project, the Herculaneum Athletics Fields, that's what this is. DeSoto, Fistus, Hillsborough School Systems. Mississippi Avenue is built on Christmas Eve there. We know that the Federal Art Project also did at least one project in Jefferson County, and this is in the Windsor, Missouri Post Office. I think it's still there. I'm not sure. That's one I haven't been there to check that to find out. But the artists needed jobs too. They were out of work. Writers needed jobs. They were out of work. Federal's Writers Project comes about at the same time. But we're still having other issues. Even a local priest gets involved with a gambling situation and has a farm for kids, but also a gambling operation going on to try to support it. I tried to find out whatever happened to him, and I followed him for about 8 months till his trial kept being continued, and then it just kind of faded away from there. So, these inn owners said you had admitted to slaying a lawyer, but this is one I really like. Woman and first husband stabbed, second is quizzed. Wouldn't you like to have been there when that was going on? I mean, I think that would be absolutely involved. So we still have quite a few things going on in the county as such. This is 1937, not this year or last year. Jefferson County farmer arrested for marijuana growing. I could tell you stories about marijuana being grown in Jefferson County that would curl your hair, but they were still there, even back in the 1930s and such. Kennett Castle, built in '54, now it becomes real significant. They reduced the taxes in Jefferson County. First reduction made in 20 years. The road debt's paid in full. 20 cents on the $100 evaluation as such. Okay, 1940, 32,000 people. 24% of the people made their living from agriculture. Value the county's 50% of it's due there. 100,000 miles of roads. Highway 21, however, ends in Hillsborough, and State Highway 61 is the only road through the county. Goes all the way through the county. The Great Depression was ended by World War II. We can say whatever we want to, but essentially that's what happened. During the war, Jefferson County was very, very active. And this is an article that I wrote that they changed that. They didn't like my thesis dissertation title, Jefferson County, Missouri Farmers During World War II. So they changed it to Milkweed, Machine Guns, and Cows, Jefferson County Farmers During World War II. Which one's better? Never mind. Okay. This becomes something that Jefferson County is known for. It's people. This is what's amazing to me of all the things that you begin to see, what happens in Jefferson County during World War II? They did civil defense. Think about it. What's the likelihood of Japanese bombers coming over Hillsborough? They did blackouts in Hillsborough. They did all sorts of, they would have Boy Scouts get on the top of buildings with binoculars looking for Japanese planes. Honest to God, they did. These are things they did through there. And, you know, we laugh today, but they were all quite serious. In October of 44, 6,000 bushels of milkweed pods were captured. Anybody, how many of you know what milkweed pods are? You know, most of you probably do. They're wheat. Well, they found out, somebody found out, some scientists found out that when they're dried, they capture a little pod of air. And since the Japanese wouldn't sell us any flotation materials anymore, this was what we used for life preservers. And so hundreds and hundreds of American sailors and airmen were saved by Jefferson County milkweed pods. And Jefferson County led the United States in milkweed pod production. People did our auxiliary police units, fire department volunteers, food production and preservation. Everybody had to have a victory garden, ration books. They would trade. Jefferson County people often traded their meat because their farms, they could have meat on their farms and trade for sugar, which would help them. And when the day was over and you were working on your farm and your neighbor still didn't bring his crop in, what would you do? Right after your work?
I'd slip over there with that.
That's exactly what you do. That's exactly what you do. You would literally, even though you're tired on your butt, you would go over and help your neighbor. And that's what they did. That's how Jefferson County farmers were able to provide a lot of materials in there. Red Cross donations of cash, all sorts of things. There were all sorts of bond drives going on, something or 7 bond drives. Jefferson County always exceeded the bond drives, and one time they succeeded over 3 times. And because of this, Jefferson County had 2 bombers named after it. The Pride of Jefferson County, Missouri, and the Spirit of Jefferson County, Missouri. They dropped bombs over Germany. Kind of interesting. Moss Hollow, if you're familiar with Moss Hollow, became a machine gun range. Also a POW garden and other places too. And some of these people, I would guess that you know some of these people's names. These were farmers during that time period. They were later very significant people in Jefferson County, political life and social life too, from that point on. And they were, when I did my thesis, I was very fortunate because I was able to interview all of these except Steele, he was dead. But I was able to interview these people and sit in their kitchens sometimes and talk to them for 2 hours about what they did during the war. And it was just absolutely amazing to see these people who were today prosperous people, but at the time were just farmers like anybody else. Jefferson County now joins the modern world as such. Rural Jefferson County attracting many new industrial plants and home subdivisions. We see now then that the land again itself provides a great value to those who live near St. Louis. And with proximity, this is when we began to grow population-wise. We become the assessed valuation raises tremendously and such. We're still a bedroom community with rural areas. You might even have seen a bear or something. Oh, wait a minute. Not too long ago here in Jefferson County. But when I moved here in '67, there were still bears in the southern part of the county. And there were also bobcats in there too. We're now in the metropolitan area as such. 1972, Arnold becomes a city. They pull together 5 areas: Tenbrook, Wicks, Flam City, Maxville, and Beck. These areas then become there. I put Buffalo Bill Cody because Louisa Frederici, his wife, Buffalo Bill Cody's wife, was from the Arnold area. Okay. Modern enrichment. This becomes significant. From the particularly 1950s and 60s, Jefferson County moves into the modern age, but not just moves in. really begins to say, what are the needs of the people? What are the needs of the people? Well, one of the first things was schools. They had so many little one-room, small schoolhouses, none of them were financially feasible. And so they did consolidated, reorganized, R3, C6. That's where those terms come from, reorganized and consolidated from the 1950s as such. The people needed a health department. They created the health department. Jefferson Memorial Hospital is created by the people. People were told, you'll never be able to finance that. They did. Jefferson Community College. They're not going to be able to do a college in Jefferson County. They did. County Development Resource Board. Who in the world is going to pay taxes for something like this? We did. ComTree, mental health services and substance abuse services. Who's going to do that? Jefferson County did. Jefferson County libraries. Libraries are old-fashioned, aren't they? No, libraries are a vital part of a community. They're a center of many communities as such. And they pass that, they support those. We've become first-class county, planning and zoning is created. I-55 is created. I can remember driving on the old Highway 30. You may remember driving the old Highway 30? Oh my gosh. That was a disaster, trying to get through that place. It took you forever. It's upgraded, it's gravel. Now then, when I moved here in '67, Highway BB was still gravel part of the way.
Right.
And it was fixed very shortly thereafter as such. And the county has done remarkable stuff with the development in the county as such. We've got an incredible growth through there. Today, look a little bit at us today. We have about 225,000 people, a few more females than males. We're still primarily a Caucasian county as such. Some people question whether we're the fastest growing county in the state, but if we aren't, we're right up there within the top 2 or 3 as such. Paul might know better than I. Would I be right in top 2 or 3?
We're close there, on top 2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, as such. So I mean, we are still the fastest growing. And part of it has significant the growth over there. The people who are older, only 14.3, back down, the next one. Single parent families, 12%. This is the one figure I thought was important. Owner occupied housing units, 81%. Now what that does, the national average is only 63%. What that says is I have an investment in this county. The people in this county invest in this county. They believe in this county because they put their lives, they raised their families through here. This is what they believe in. 81% of the population owns their own house and such. That speaks incredibly well for people. The national average in poverty is 14.7. We're only about 10.6. So we have a strong economy here in our county too. Cost of living is less than the national average. The one area we're not doing well with, and that's education. When we look at this, the national average per pupil is about 12,500. We're a little bit less than 10,000. So that's one area that we need some improvement on. That's the only glaring area that we have that we're really falling behind in. Median household income, 55,000. The average commute to work is 29.4 minutes. National average was 24.6. My wife, Renee, who's the remote advanced, spent 35 minutes a day on the good days driving for 30 years into the St. Louis city so she could live out here in Jefferson County. It was pretty cool. Industry you might find it for significance too. Healthcare and social assistance, 13.4. Construction, 9.6. We're higher than the Missouri average. We have a strong construction group of people through here. Agricultural, look at this, less than 1%. If anything tells you how much has changed in our county, that figure right there tells you a tremendous amount. Well, you might want to know, since I've been telling you this stuff, what's going to happen in the future. And I have a little crystal ball here. It's going to tell you a few things that are going to happen in the future. Our port's going to come through. Festus, Herculaneum, Peabody, and Crystal City, that will change everything in this county. in so many ways you can hardly imagine. One of the things, 55 will be expanded south of Festus, so have another lane in it, which it needs to. Highway 21 will be south of DeSoto. There'll be a new corridor highway created from Highway M to I-44. The reason why is if you have a port that's unloading goods, you've got to get to the other highways. And you've got to get to 44 from Herculaneum, this area and such. That's got to happen. Highway Z is going to be straightened and upgraded because you're going to have to get to the county seat. There will be a bridge created across the Mississippi River south of Festus with links from Highway 55 to I-24, which goes down right in the center of Illinois.
Is that in the county where you're talking about?
That's in St.
St. Francis County?
No, this will be in our county.
Oh, will it?
This will be south of Festus. I could probably show you where it all goes. But anyway, but we've got to get to the Illinois corridor to get there south too. Charter government will be tweaked a little bit for some efficiency. Hey, let me explain to you how well this county operates compared to some of the other counties that have charter government and are tried to have charter and haven't done it. This county works very, very well. It really does. Festus Crystal City will be merged for most services. That's a controversial one right there.
Yeah.
But they have 2 fire departments. They have 2 educational systems. They have 2 police departments. They have 2 road departments. This is expensive. 2 water. This is expensive. At some point, you have to. One of the things I learned at Comtree, I never turned a budget in the red ever. You have to be able to have financial security to be able to operate. And Festus and Crystal City's got to get their act together at some point. I've told them this too, so I'm not telling you. Most taxes will be increased to the national average. It's going to have to do that. It's going to have things that people need. The county population will exceed 300,000. And poverty rates will be cut in half because of all of the internal development through here. And that's what's going to happen based on the bicentennial research that I've been doing. This is our last day, December 8th, 2018. There will be a banquet at that time period through there. And I'll see if you've got any questions now. You can turn that on. That's it. Okay, questions, comments? Did anybody learn anything? Okay, I fulfilled my promise. I'm known for that.
In my family's history, they were involved in a town called Flukum,
Yes,
which was south of Festus, and there was a railroad went through there.
Gluten Road.
There used to be, evidently, there used to be lots and lots of railroad systems throughout Missouri. Is that you see that coming back with, it seems like the train tracks are filled with trains today, where they, 2 years ago, it didn't seem like there's that much traffic. I just wonder if they're gonna start creating more, rebuild some of those train.
Well, my crystal ball's a little cloudy when it comes to that issue. I will say that it costs, if you take a container truck and you take this and put it on a rail from a truck that it's been driving up to, it costs you 7 cents a mile to take that container from one point A to point B. If you kept it on the truck and drove it that way, it was going to cost you 10 times that much, maybe more than that and such. So it's going to cost you more. So rail is important. This is why Jefferson County is situated so well, because it's got the rail going right straight down. It follows Highway 55, you've got the rail through there. And if you just get over to I-24 and get over to I-44, you're going to be able to have an incredible economic boom to this particular area and such.
Because they're putting a rail system from St. Genevieve in Mississippi all the way through Farmington out to Potosi, and then Potosi down to the new rail station at the, what's that place where they jump off the rocks into the river? Shut-ins.
Johnson shut-in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was wondering if Jefferson County is going to see some rail added back, what you're talking about with the.
I think probably improvements is possible.
Okay.
I don't see another rail coming. I don't think it's possible. You're talking about, again, remember the land.
Well, there was a rail system through Flukum. I
Yeah,
just wondered if they could
there's
put that back in place.
It would go, the only way you'll have anything like that is if there is a need to reach a particular place. Remember, our mountain railroad came through DeSoto only because it was going to Ironton. It wasn't because they wanted to stop at DeSoto just because of the water. They were going somewhere else to get there. Yeah.
When do you project the port coming in? How many more years?
Paul can probably tell you better than I can on this. I would say within 15.
15?
And
I
that,
wish it would be faster, but.
I can't see how I can go just, you must understand, I'm on the State Mental Health Commission. I work with the government. I have a pretty good idea of what's going on in the state government and various activities and what's possible. And for the next 5 years, economically, there's no possibility. There's just no possibility of anything going on to any great extent. After that, we'll see what happens through there. But it'll have to grow a little bit at a time. So it'll happen. That's why my projections are 50 years out.
Is it up to Washington DC?
I'm sorry?
Is it up to Washington DC?
It's a combination of things. It's a combination of both. Jefferson County's chomping at the bit. Paul's done a great job, by the way, of trying to advocate for what we've been doing in this area as such. And to be fair, our other legislators, all of them have been really involved with trying to get this for the county, because it was when we talk about this being a game changer, it is an incredible game changer for this entire county in so many different ways through there. So it'll happen, but it's going to take a little while to do that. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.